welcome to the AWS White Box Methodology lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be taking a look to the HackTricks Cloud methodology, which is composed of 5 different components that we are going to be explaining during these slides. But basically, it will allow you to start any kind of cloud assessment. It will explain you how to make the most of the time you have for the audit, even if you are starting the audit without knowing anything about the AWS accounts. The only requisite that you need to start an AWS audit is enough credentials to access the AWS account. So that's what we are going to be explaining during this lesson. Enjoy. So in many occasions, the starting point where you need to do these kind of audits is that either you're working in a pen testing company, maybe in your own company as a freelancer, and a company just asks you to, hey, we need to check the security of all these AWS accounts. Can you help us? Or maybe you are working in a client, you're working in a company and they have several different AWS accounts and you have been hired as a security pen tester, and you need to take a look around to the AWS accounts and perform a white box audit. So the most probably starting point is that you're going to be knowing nothing about the AWS accounts. It will be great if the client can share. We are going to be talking about clients because the most usual request is for a pen test. So it will be great if the client can give you a walkthrough around the AWS accounts, can give you some documentation about what are the AWS accounts used for, each service that is being used, the regions that are used, give you just some information about all the accounts that you need to pen test. However, in my experience, this usually don't happen, and you are just going to find yourself with some credentials to some random accounts that you need to figure out yourself what are they used for and try to find all the misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. So yeah, usually you're going to be given more than one AWS account, but I guess that it can occur that a client have everything inside an account, which is a very bad idea. All the different stages of a company, I'm talking about production, testing, staging, should be in different AWS accounts. They shouldn't be related to each other in any way. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the course, in the root account, in the management account, there shouldn't be anything but the root user and some configuration from the IAM Identity Center and for the other children accounts. But the root account should be having anything. So if you find that organization just have this account and everything is in there, that's definitely a high vulnerability. They shouldn't be doing that. But yeah, let's continue. You have access to different accounts. You know nothing potentially about them. And you have requested to have access to some users, role, or whatever they can give you access to with the role policy read-only access. This is a very interesting policy that is maintained by AWS. They are adding some extra, every time they develop a new service, they are going to be adding new permissions to this policy, and it basically will give you read access over most of the AWS services. So you will be able to access most of the configurations of the services in AWS. Also, they took in mind that they cannot just give you read access over everything. For example, it will be a problem if you could read the secret manager with this policy, so you are not going to be able to. But for example, you're going to be able to read S3 buckets. So most companies will be storing some kind of sensitive information in there. But yeah, at the end, the client should be trusting you because at the end, they are giving you access to their accounts. So yeah, this is the main policy that you should be asking for. Anyway, there are going to be some other permissions or some other policies that you might be to need asking for later during the audit, because you might not have access to read everything you need just with this policy. For example, in the IAM Identity Center, in Cognito, in Tower, in AKS, there are some configurations that you're just not going to be able to read to access just with this policy. But it's also true that most companies won't be using all of these services. So maybe you can just ask for this policy, and if during the assessment you need extra permissions to read other services configurations, you can just ask for them. And also, as I made in the starting point, you probably know nothing about the accounts. So we need to optimize the time to make it as efficient as possible in order to be able to perform a white box audit methodology. It's going to be white box because we have access, we have read access over it, and we need to make the most of our time. So in the Cloud HackTricks methodology, we have 5 special steps. At this time, we have 5 main components to check in a specific order, so you start understanding better how the AWS accounts are working, and then you start looking for vulnerabilities. So these 5 components are going to be benchmark checks, service enumeration, exposed assets, IAM permissions, and integrations. So we are going to be checking what each of these components are exactly in the following slides, but allow me to give you a brief summary about each component. So benchmark checks, we are talking about, for example, the CIS benchmark, the AWS best practices benchmark, or even some custom benchmark that some automatic tools are going to be implementing. This basically indicates that the best security way to configure different services in AWS. We are going to be running the first one, because we don't know nothing about the account, and we could definitely start just logging into each account and try to check everything manually. But if you just run this automatic benchmark and start reading the report and start reading the misconfigurations form, you're going to be finding things such as the services that the account is using, the regions that the accounts are using, how are they more or less vulnerable or misconfigured. So running the benchmark checks are going to allow you to move forward in your audit, but also get to know the accounts. Then we have some services enumeration. Of course, during the benchmark checks, we have already enumerated a lot of the services, but now that we know which services are going to be used, you can enumerate them more in depth, automatically or manually. So my recommendation, of course, is to continue running some other automatic tools to enumerate services to get as many information as possible about all the services that are being used in the AWS accounts. But if you find that the account is using a service that you don't know much about it, that is weird, or that some tool found that it has something misconfigured, my recommendation always is going to check it manually. You can go to the web console, check all the configurations, you can play with it, you can read the documentation, understand perfectly what is happening in there, until you figure out if there are some misconfiguration or vulnerabilities that you should be reporting. So benchmark checks usually are going to be more or less mostly automatic. Maybe you need to run some manual benchmark checks yourself. And then in the service enumeration, you are going to be continue launching tools, but also going to do a lot of manual tasks in order to completely understand what is happening with each service and checking all the vulnerabilities. Also, my recommendation is that for the benchmark checks and the service enumeration automatic tools that you are going to be launching, if you find something weird, always check it yourself. You shouldn't be reporting false positives to the client or to your organization. So always check, if possible, all the findings that you have done with the automatic tools. Then another very, very important component of an AWS environment, of a cloud environment, is going to be the exposed assets. So here we are talking about ports that are open to the internet, services that are open to the internet, but also about services that can be exposed to the internet via IAM permissions or resource policies. Here I am talking, for example, about S3 buckets that are publicly available, SQS queues that could be publicly available, or any other service that via IAM policies or via resource policies can be opening it to all the internet, or maybe to external accounts that you don't know nothing about them. So because this will be the easiest way to find a foothold inside the AWS account, you should definitely be able to map all the exposed assets via networking, such as ports, such as webs, but also via policies that allow other users in different accounts, all the users in the internet, or maybe specific accounts, external accounts that you don't know nothing about, and report them to the client, especially the ones that you think are going to be more vulnerable, such as, for example, opening the RDP or SSH ports to all the internet, opening databases to all the internet, or just exposing buckets or queues or any other services to all the internet or specific external accounts. The next component is going to be obviously IAM permissions. You cannot perform a complete white box audit if you don't focus for some time in the IAM permissions that the users have. I mean users, I mean IAM users, IAM roles, but also identity center users, groups, and permissions. You should be checking all of them. You should be checking that there are not too many high privilege users, that there are no potential privilege escalations combinations for users, that there are not, well, at the end, sensitive permissions that principals shouldn't be having. Also, you need to check the permissions that the roles attached to different services are going to be having, because of course you don't want an EC2 instance that is exposed to the internet to be having administrator access over all the AWS account. So during this test, during this part in the IAM permissions, you need to review all the principals and all the permissions they have, indicate which ones are super privileged, indicate which ones could be used for privilege escalation and to where these users could be arrived, and which roles have many excessive privilege. And when we talk about the excessive privilege, of course, we talk about unnecessary privilege. For example, if a user is not going to be using EC2, but he has privilege over EC2, those are unnecessary, but also about the use of wildcards in permissions and in resources. The ideal permission, the ideal policy is going to be a custom policy specifying exactly the permissions that are needed, no wildcards in there, over the exact resources they are needed over. So no wildcard also in the resources. That's the best way to assign permissions. The reality is that no company is going to be doing that. Probably all of them are going to be using at some point wildcard, either in the permissions or in the resources or in both. But your objective as pen tester is to improve this, so you should be reporting them, hey, you should be improving this way to assign permissions. But of course, start focusing on high privilege permissions, unnecessary sensitive permissions, and privilege escalations ways for principals in AWS. The final component, the fifth component we are going to be talking about, are the integrations. So far, we have reviewed the benchmarks, so we have reviewed all the services, we have found out all the weird stuff that is happening in services in the account. We have mapped all the exposed assets via ports, via networking, but also via policies. We have checked IAM permission, we have checked high sensitive users, high sensitive privilege, necessary privilege, and the last part is going to be the integrations. This means who is able to access externally to AWS. And in this case, I'm not only talking about external accounts being allowed to do stuff in services via resource policies, or external accounts be able to assume roles. I am talking also about things such as identity providers that might be allowing, for example, GitHub Actions to log in, or any other external platform that maybe Okta, OneLogin, any identity provider that AWS could be allowing to log in. Because as an auditor, if you don't have access to those external platforms, you don't really know what is happening in there. And maybe there is some Okta configure with an administrator groups, that AWS administrator groups that have access to the administrator policy inside AWS, but you don't really know what is happening inside that Okta environment. So there might be 1 or 100 different users in this Okta group. So your goal as pen tester is to identify all these integrations, all these external users, external people that is going to be able to log in AWS, and let the client know that they should either be hiring you to check these external platforms and make sure everything is secure, or check themselves that there are not too many users, that only the users that should be having these permissions are in the assigned groups to these permissions, and so on. So in the last part, in the integration, we are going to be checking how from external platforms users are going to be able to access our AWS account. This could be a great way for an attacker to get a foothold, or maybe to completely compromise an external account just by compromising other platforms. So we should be letting know the client or your organization, hey, this could be happening, please check it, or give me enough permissions to check it, because, well, could be really important and really sensitive. The next tool we are going to be trying is called CloudFox, which helps you gain situational awareness in unfamiliar cloud environments. It's an open source command line tool created to help penetration testers and other offensive security professionals to find exploitable attack paths in cloud infrastructure. Some questions that CloudFox can help you answering will be something like, what region is this AWS account using, and really how many resources are in the account? what secrets are inside user data or environmental variables, what world has administrative permissions attached, actions permission does this principal have, what role trusts are overly permissive or allow cross-account consumption. Well, basically it's going to be running again several different tests and giving us some security answers in order to find misconfigurations or potential attack paths. So I have already downloaded this tool. I have already run it. Actually, let me show you how it looks, the output. This is going to be a Golang tool. So I have downloaded the binary and give enough permissions to be executed. It's going to be getting information about these services here. 373 tasks needs to, oh no, actually task completed. 775 tasks were completed during this audit of CloudFox, and actually we are rating all the output to this path. Info U1, okay, org JSON, txt CSV JSON. So it looks like we are just writing all the output to these files in that same folder. So I'm actually in this folder. If we do ls, we can see that we have definitely a lot of information here. So what I'm going to be doing just is cut everything that ends with JSON. Let's do maybe some this. At some point we should start finding, getting some findings. What do we have here? AKS cluster, value, AKS demo, create complete. Okay. Security groups, parameters, rollback, stack name. Okay. Actually, I cannot see. Maybe this is just information about each instance we have in the account. Check. Okay. Cool. Well, I guess we could see all this information. Okay, well, looks like CloudFox is going to be able to give us a lot of information about what is happening inside this AWS account. What I run was this CloudFox AWS profile all checks. What documentation, read-only permission. This is the permissions I told you to take a look. What documentation in the wiki? Okay. Access key, list active access keys. Okay, so we could also, instead of running all the checks, we could just run the checks we are interested in. Like this one, maybe we can check Envars. I guess we could do that. Let's see what happens. So first of all, I need to go back to downloads, CloudFox, and run Envars. Okay. So I check AWS written to here. Okay, so maybe we can open the txt. Okay, so here basically we are finding the environmental variables of these Lambda functions to get the values and maybe search for interesting secrets or sensitive information. And I guess that if you're interested, you can just run CloudFox per service if that helps you finding the information that is going to be more relevant for you. What is this PMapper stuff? PMapper, let's try local file system. There, yes, okay, who can previous to admin? So this could be useful to find out who can previous to admin. maybe we can run it also. Let's check what it does. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we need actually to use the PMapper tool in order to create the graphs, and CloudFox will attempt to enrich this command and others with PMapper per previous data. Okay. Okay, so basically CloudFox is able to use a PMapper in order to, well, enrich the data that he's going to create. Okay, maybe we can take a look to this one, which is useful for cross-attack paths to see trust between different accounts. So let's run this one. No resources found. Okay, so nothing was found. But actually you have some trust, I think, with other accounts. But yeah. Okay, well, you have definitely more commands that you can use to check what interesting information about different services and also about privilege escalation. So this tool was CloudFox.